And we're back.
Hey, we're back.
Ray, how's your audio?
That's great. Really
awesome.
Good.
Genius. Yeah. Fantastic. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so now we're going to be feeding to YouTube. I guess, Mark, you're going to pass along questions in the Zoom chat.
That is correct.
That's the deal.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. I'll keep an eye out for that. But man, yeah, I mean, let's. We were kind of bragging on you, Ray. Talking about Steve Earle, talking about Lucinda Williams. You know, I know you've done. Vance was saying Mellencamp. I know you've done a bunch of stuff with Dell McCrory, and you've done some stuff with like Willie and Waylon and those crew too, right?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. We did. You know, when Steve and I got together, we formed a production company called Twang Trust, and we did a lot of records together. And then Warner Brothers gave us a joint venture record label called E Squared, and that went on for 8 years. You know, with budgets, and we would go out and listen to bands and sign them, and we signed about a dozen acts and bring them in the studio and produce them and, you know, record them and mix them. And, you know, it was a really good time because the budgets were decent and we didn't have any A&R people. We had total creative control.
Amazing.
And it was in the 90s pretty much. And then when Steve left Warner Brothers and went to Artemis, Danny Goldberg continued that joint venture with E Squared, and so it actually went for like 12 years, and a lot of good times. A lot of crazy things happened too. It's like, I'll tell you, the first band that Steve and I ever co-produced was called the V-Roys, and they were originally called the Viceroys, but they couldn't use that, so they changed it to the V-Roys, and they came in the studio. And I'll never forget the first day of recording, because we'd been out to see them at nightclubs and they were great. And they got in the studio and they couldn't play, they couldn't perform. And we're going, after like, you know, trying for a few hours, we go, guys, you know, what's going on? It's like, what's the problem? They go, well, first of all, we've never played during the day and we've never played sober. So they've never played sober at all. So, well, what do? Well, we bring some beer in. So at that time, Steve had a driver because he didn't have a driver's license, a guy named Randy. So he went and picked up a case of Budweiser and brought it back to the studio. So guys let them drink a couple of beers and they started to loosen up and got in the studio, and then we got our first track, and, you know, kind of did the whole record that way. It was interesting, you know.
Late
we had
nights.
to turn the studio into a nightclub, basically, dim the lights and everything, you know. So
did you bring a crowd in?
No, we didn't need to. It wasn't about that at all. Because I think they played empty bars before too, you know.
Right. I heard a story about them doing that on Sweet Tea record on Buddy Guy. They basically brought like 20 people in, hang out, and they brought a bar and a bartender, and, you know, he just played to them basically for a few hours for 3 or 4 nights, and then they cut the record together.
Yeah.
So I've actually had bands play in front of the audience in the control in the tracking room, you know, but it's, you know, nobody stays quiet. Fucking people.
Yeah.
Band would end the take and somebody would start clapping. I was like, no clapping. So, whatever.
It's the thing a lot of musicians go through is like getting in the studio is like you start being more self-conscious and you don't play the same way you do on stage. And it takes a while to adjust, and eventually most people figure it out, you know.
Right.
You know, it's just a different mindset being in the studio, you know. So anyways, we went on to sign all kinds of rock bands, and, you know, and it was, like I said, it was really good times. And, you know, I had gotten that Telefunken console in about that time too, and I was using it as a sidecar, 8 channels of V76S's, and summing amps, and starting to use that more and more, trying to roll that into the equation of my recording sounds and so forth. And I ended up having to do a lot of mods to that console so I could go preamp in and preamp out rather than going through all the summing buses and everything. So.
And you had another desk at that time too, though, right?
Oh yeah, I had a big console, a 56-channel console. That was just the sidecar. Yeah.
Right. What was that?
Well, it was
a VR.
No, it was actually a Maxcon too, but it was pretty much custom built.
CAD.
A CAD Maxcon too, but I didn't really like the master modules. So the guy that designed it, Bob Reams, he kind of helped me build a custom master module with speaker selection, switches, all the stuff that the nice consoles had. We added on, and over a period of couple of years, I kept tweaking the board, and I still have that board. The thing that's great about it, there's no capacitors, and it's all servo controlled. So the frequency response of it is like from 5 hertz to 5. I don't know. It's like way up there,
right,
like 5,000 or something.
Right. No coupling caps.
There's no caps in the audio. Yeah. So it's totally wide open.
So it's pure inductors in the EQ section?
The EQ is really special. It's called a constant Q EQ, which is there's no phase shift in the equalizers. In other words, the Q changes with the amount of cut or boost in the EQ, and it's really a sweet sounding EQ. It's my favorite EQ. I mean, I use it. It's my main EQ. I still use all the time.
And you still have all 56 channels of that?
Yeah.
Yep.
During this downtime, I've spent about between 200 and 300 hours rebuilding it. Changing pots and switches and faders and stuff. It's just, I got it.
I understand that.
1989, and it was time to go through and rebuild it all. So.
Yeah, this is your main desk, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Cool. So, a lot of people think that that in order to make great records, which you've made, or make Grammy-winning records, which you've made a ton of, that you have to have like a Neve or an API or something expensive like that. But you're doing a lot of this through a CAD Maxon. Yeah,
it's a pretty invisible footprint. It's like the console almost doesn't really have a sound. You color it and flavor it with your choice of microphones and instruments and outboard gear. And of course, I've got a lot of outboard gear. So
yeah, I was gonna say, like, why don't we delve into that for a second? Like, speaking of colors and flavors, like, what are your favorite colors and flavors? What are your go-tos, and what are like some of the tricks you use with that stuff?
Well, you guys know this already, but I love 1176s, and I've got a lot of them, and they're all vintage. I don't have any new ones, even though I've used them. They're all like, they're the blue stripes, they're the early black face. I've got 1 C, I've got 2 or 3 Ds, I've got some E's, I've got some F's, and they change over their period of their mods. They just get a little quieter and a little darker. So like I always use the F's on bass and low frequency stuff because they're the quietest, but they have the best bottom end. So as they reduce noise on those 1176s, they actually lost some top end, Makes sense.
That. I noticed sometimes the blue stripes on certain vocalists will get a little spitty, like the S's will get a little sharp.
Oh yeah. The blue stripes definitely. I mean, they're really close to pure Class A. I mean, I think the very first Rev A was a pure Class A blue stripe, and then they called the AB. They only made 25 of those, and then I think they started at 100. At 126, they changed to an AB circuit, but it still has this. It's almost like it has a built-in EQ, and everybody loves that EQ on vocals. And it's like it's, you know, it's like a C12 or a 251 kind of a airy top end that it just adds to whatever mic you use. So you guys have blue stripes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do not.
But they
But
do.
You bought them. You bought them when they weren't like $8 million.
I think the first one I bought was $300.
Yep.
That's awful.
But it was broken. But it was just the power supply. I just had.
I think I paid $1,700 for my 2 E's or F's. I have a pair of F's, and I think I paid $1,700 for the pair at the time,
which is still a deal. So 1176 is on vocals and on bass. What else? Drums.
Everything. Drums, guitars, basses, everything. And then I had some compressors that were built by. Do you remember Dolly West had a son named Mo West?
Mo West. I remember the name. I don't know him.
He was building gear, and he had something unfortunate happen to him. He died. I don't remember, it was a car wreck or something, but he built me 4 channels of basically his version of 1176, and I use those all the time too.
Interesting.
And they're 4 channels in one rack, so it just adds to my palette. So I have like nearly 24 channels of that type of compression. Then you throw in the DBX 160s and Neve 33609, Neve 2264. So I love compression. I mean, it's just like, you know, I probably abuse it, but one of my techniques of using compression in general is always slow attack, fast release, and then you can hit it a lot harder, and it becomes a tone box. So it's not really doing much compression. You don't hear the compressor working. You're just hearing an enhancement in the tone. It's just pushing the tone out right in through the speakers. And that's basically why I like compression.
So I want to ask you, since you mentioned that, somebody just asked me this, and Vance, I want to ask you too. So when do you use a fast attack?
I don't ever.
Ever.
I don't ever.
Unless I'm going after some kind of wacky snare drum sound or something, where I just wanted to like really clip it off and, you know, get a really tight, fast attack, you know, medium release, and just have it just be like a really, almost like a sample.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen with me very, very often. I go for pretty natural sounds. Most of the records.
I don't think I've ever, on 1176, I don't think I've ever moved that, you know, like if this is all the way slow and that's all the way fast, I've never gone beyond 12 o'clock.
I got to be honest, I don't know which side of the knob on the 1176 is slow or fast. I just like turn them, you know, until it sounds good. I should actually.
Slow is all the way over right before it turns off.
Slow is all the way to the left on the attack, and slow release is all the way to the right.
Cool. Just check. Slow attack, fast release. Check.
Yeah.
I just looked.
Yeah. I've had to use that attack a couple times when like using 1176 on like a kick drum, where I've wanted the front edge of it to be soft. You know what I mean? To get that sort of, you know, that thing, you know, and then make the attack or the attacks a little slow, a little closer to fast, a little away from slow, and then where the boom sort of stretches out a bit. But that's the only time I think I've ever done that. And like guitars, slow, fast, done.
It's just one of the best compressors ever made. You can do so many different things with it. Even like running a bass through 1176. Sometimes if I want to grab onto the notes longer, I'll pull the release in and clamp on it a little longer, so that the bass is like the ring out of the bass is longer.
Right.
Most of the time I let go of it, but it depends on like an upright bass. A lot of times the K of the bass disappears too quick. So I'll just clamp down on the release a little bit,
So is that your desert island, Ray? Like if you just had one compressor? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Do you ever use it as a mic preamp?
No, I never have. Have you?
I have.
Yeah, I mean, if you put a U67 in front of a guitar amp, you can run it right into an 1176 and it works fine.
It's great on U47 on kick drum, straight to 1176.
Oh, that's a good trick.
So are you getting some grunge in that, using it that way?
It just sounds cool.
I mean, you're gaining it up a lot.
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, like a 67 a 67 on a guitar amp, no pad will hit 1176 at line at 0. Yeah. So you're not even really adding any gain. I mean, it's, plenty of signal. So, and same thing with a 47, like on kick drum, which is really one of my favorite sounds. So,
I'll tell you,
47, are you saying a FET or a real 47?
Real 47.
Gotcha.
I will have to mention, this is a Steve Earle quote that was from a magazine interview, and it was an early record we did. It might have been Feel Alright or El Corazon. In the interview, he was talking about our use and abuse of 1176s, and he said that I used so much compression on his vocal that you could tell what he had for breakfast.
Hey, so what vocal mic is on him?
It's a U67. We always use U67s on Steve. Either the one I have that was modded by Fred Cameron, or we were up at Electric Lady recording in December, and they had a really, really nice original U67 that had never been messed with or altered. Original cap, original everything. We used that. That was one of the best ones I've ever heard. And that's just my choice. And every time I mention to Steve, why don't we try out this M249 or M269 or whatever, he goes, no, 67. The 67 is my mic. And so I just go, yeah, okay, yeah, it works. It works every time,
Yeah, that's my desert island mic too.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. 100%.
You guys know I just got this Heiserman, this custom built Heiserman, which they're known for making the H47s, which are U47, their version of it. Well, Dave Wheeler, Craig Alvin turned me onto it, and I got a demo for about 10 days and really loved the sound of it, but I always wanted a 48, so I asked Dave, I said, man, can you build me a U48? An H48 or whatever. And his eyes lit up, and he had this kind of sparkle, like, wow, I can't believe you just asked me that. That's cool. And he did. And I just got it about 2 weeks ago. And
48s are one of my
I do the 48 over 47 all the time. If I ever at a studio like Blackbird or whatever, I always ask for a pair of 48s. And they go, you don't want 47s? No, I don't like 47s. I mean, they're too bright. They're too I don't know. They're too clean. And the 48 always has a little more character, And I don't know. I mean, they're pretty close to the same besides the pattern. I don't know. There's a difference in the sound.
There's two capsules. There's two capsules in a 48.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a different backplate too. Then.
Yeah, your backplate is basically a capsule, so they're screened on both sides. So, yeah.
Hey, speaking of, I got a question from someone. Christian said, "I'd love to hear about Ray's use of distortion on vocals, especially Steve Earle. I love that sound."
Oh, okay. That's back to the topic we were on before about the 1176s. That's just pushing them harder. That's like taking an 1176 or two of them sometimes, and just on the insert of the console, like it doesn't even matter if it's tape or digital. It's like just hitting it a lot harder, and like probably about 3 o'clock. That's a lot of compression.
Yeah.
The slow attack, fast release, about 3 o'clock, and then you do the gain makeup, and you got a little bit of grit in there then. but it's nice. It's really, it's kind of fun distortion, you know?
So you'll do 2 in a row if you need to, just to get that funk on it?
Yeah, yeah. Or a blue stripe and a black face together, you know?
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What about Lucinda? What do you cut her on?
Pretty much the same signal path. I think, you know, the first time I recorded Lou is when she came in to sing on a duet with Steve called You're Still Standing There. And she, I didn't really have I put her in the hallway on a U67, and she sang on that. And she said it was her best experience in a studio singing ever. Mm. And so that kind of led to, you know, ongoing conversations. And eventually, you know, we got asked to record Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, and with her road band, basically, you know. And, you know, having just worked with Lou on a new record, we've been reflecting and telling stories about Car Wheels and stuff. And even though it's over 20 years ago, we still, I remember it like it was yesterday, because it was such a great experience. And I remember Lou coming in and, you know, setting up drums and changing heads and doing all the stuff you do to get the day before a session, you know. And I remember she said, well, you know, you don't spend too much time on that microphone, because, you know, I'm just going to do scratch vocals. And I said, scratch vocals? What are you talking about? She goes, well, that's how I've always recorded. She says, I've always just done, you know, track vocals, scratch vocals, whatever you want to call them. And then I come back and do my real vocals later. I said, well, you know, why don't you just go for it? You know, I mean, there's no reason not to. I said, you know, I think the more you put into it, especially emotionally, the more that you, more effort you put into like singing your songs, these great songs that you'll inspire the band. They'll probably play different when you, and she goes, you know, I never really thought about it like that. And she did. So the first song we cut, she sang it live with the band, and we came back and listened to it. And it was, she was smiling and going, wow, I've never done that before. And so that's kind of set a new precedent for her way of recording. We did the whole album like that. It was all live vocals, you know. I'm not to say that we didn't punch in a word or two or a phrase here or there, because we always would have to do that, because somebody might start coughing or miss a lyric or whatever, but for the most part, live vocals. And this new record, Good Souls, Better Angels, is 100% all live, with the band's live and she's live, you know.
And when you do that, Ray, I've noticed that a lot of times when you say live, you mean in the same room, and your room isn't huge, right? Like everyone's pretty close.
It's a pretty big room. I mean,
well, it's not 4,000. It's not 4,000 square feet. It's not like, you know, Abbey Road Studio 2 or anything like that. But
no, but it's like almost 2,000 square feet, you know, and it's got 21-foot ceilings, and it's a big open space, you know.
That's true.
You know, it's you know, it's got a hallway, and it's got a keyboard room down at the other end, and you know, but the main part of the room, you know, I can set up 3 drum kits in the main room, you know, and just move the mics around. So I mean, it's a pretty good amount of space, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And also, since, you know, originally I had the control room down on the first floor after the flood, and I had to move stuff out and move, you know, kind of reconstruct the studio. I moved the console upstairs, and it was sort of a just survival thing where I could get the console in and start doing mix jobs, and while I was kind of fixing the room downstairs. And once I got the console up there, I didn't realize that it weighed, you know, 4,000 pounds. And by the time we got it up there and put it back together again, it wasn't coming back down. Yeah. So that just, and I didn't even think about it while we were doing it, but it kind of became more like Abbey Road, you know, control room up on the second
upstairs,
floor,
yeah,
and big open space. And I started thinking in terms of like, well, what if we just try to keep everybody in the same room together as much as possible?
Right.
You know, throw amps and have like vocal rooms, and everybody out in the room, and throw the amps in the bathroom and the keyboard room and the vocal booths, and just isolate the things we need to, but keep everybody as a band all in the same room. And you guys do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes Vance does it, I think, a lot.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that I cut, it depends. A lot of times when you're cutting like some of the country stuff, I try and get everyone seated in the room, like you were saying, and then just isolate whatever you have to. But a lot of times when you have, an acoustic player, he ends up getting locked away somewhere. Or the singer wants to get locked into a booth. I don't know. I mean, there's pros and cons. When we used to cut at Zach Brown's place, which is closed now, Southern Ground, you couldn't cut piano at the same time as anything else because there was just drums and all the piano mics. Unless you were doing it all live one take, you got to deal with that. But sometimes that's the way to go.
Well, a lot of it has to do with how loud things are, and especially the drums. This last Rodney Crowell record, Texas, we did about half the record all live in the room with Rodney doing live vocals in the room without headphones.
Right.
Cool.
A lot of times, Jerry Rowe played on quite a few tracks, and Fred Eltringham, and they basically everybody played pretty quiet. So everybody was in close proximity, and there were some sessions we did with like no headphones at all, except the drummer,
Right.
and just, everybody, there's not a problem playing quiet, or playing through a Princeton amp and pointing it towards the wall. That works out really well,
Yeah.
How could they hear click if they didn't have headphones on?
What click?
I actually had
that old.
Hanford said, no, I'm sorry, Hanford, I'll be right back to you. Ordloff said, question for Ray. Was your same console, the Maxon, used for mixing I Feel All Right and Ghosts of West Virginia? Because they're really drastically different. And what changed? Like, were you just changing the way you mix, or what happened?
Same console. There have been a lot of mods and tweaks to that console. There are a lot of differences. I mean, Feel All Right was 95. So Ghost of West Virginia was cut up in New York at Electric Lady through 78. But here's the deal.
Was I Feel All Right? Was that a tape record, obviously?
Yeah, it was tape.
95?
Yeah.
Is that 22 or 2250? You know what I mean? A Sony machine or like an analog machine?
MCI. Well, I had an Atari MX80 and MCI JH16 with 24 track and 16 track heads. But I'd say the biggest difference is that Ghost of West Virginia is completely mono. It's a mono record. Mono CD, mono vinyl. When we were up at Electric Lady recording, I'm so glad I face checked all the mics. Because, what happens when you and I'm not really big on stereo miking, but at least the drums, sometimes I had like a pair of overheads that were stereo and a mono center mic. And, if everything's not in phase and you sum it to mono, things start to disappear. And, actually I did one mid-side recording on a vocal group, and I had had an M269 and sideways and mid-side figure 8, but I just turned off one side of the capsule. I just used pin 2 or pin 3. I can't remember.
So did Steve decide mono? Like, we're mixing this in mono?
We kind of talked about it while we were recording. And as we got deeper into the record, it started to make more sense. It was the songs, it was the performances, it was the sound we were getting, and basically just the rough mixes we were doing. I just it was Neve 8078 has a mono section, has a monitor section, and I just started putting everything in mono on the rough mixes, you know, and then that's when I realized how, you know, having phase checked everything, that it was like it summed together really well in mono. And then when I brought it back to my room in Nashville, brought the hard drives in, and you know, it was actually the first mono record I've ever mixed. It's pretty big challenge because without pan, you know, I would love pan pots. I love to record a lot of tracks in mono and use the stereo landscape to where you put things and spread things apart. Like you got a piano on one side and a B3 on the other side. You know, one electric guitar at 2 o'clock and one at 10 o'clock. Well, once you put everything in mono, the only tool you have is volume and EQ. And, you know, of course, we're really not using any reverb. This is a pretty dry sounding record. There's like, you know, I'm not known for using reverb very much. And if there is any, you can hardly hear it. So I learned some new things about EQ mixing in mono. That's how you like separate the sounds, the frequencies from an acoustic guitar to electric guitar to a vocal. Also, you know, everything you do becomes so much more interactive. And, you know, you put a little 3K on a electric guitar, and then that eats into that frequency on the vocal. So, you know, it's a lot trickier balance mixing in mono. Have you guys mixed in mono?
I have.
Oh, that's not true. I have mixed in mono, but usually, you know, either by mistake or they just wanted something turned in in mono too.
Yeah, you know, I've been reading about a thing called quantum entanglement, which is, you know, a scientific thing. And, you know, I started thinking of, when I was mixing this record, I was starting to think of it as sonic entanglement. And sonic entanglement means everything you do to each individual sound affects the total sound of everything else. I mean, it's so glued together and interactive that everything is entangled, you know, and that's pretty much true of recording in general, but it's even more true in mono.
Okay, so I have 2 quick questions for both of you guys as far as mono goes. During this process, Ray, especially because you just did it, did you find yourself using more subtractive EQ than you normally might? And 2, out of curiosity, after the record was done, did you ever just take your mono mix and pan it out and see what happens?
Not sure what you mean by panning it out.
Well, I mean, like if everything were pan mono on your console, but what you would normally do is put like the acoustic over here and the electric over here. I'm just curious, after EQing it and compress and working on it mono, that if you spread things out in a stereo field,
you mean off the multi-track?
Yeah, off the multi-tracks.
Yeah, I did play around with that a little bit, you know. I was curious. I mean, there was at one point I was like thinking, well, maybe we'll do stereo and mono, but Steve was pretty adamant about just having mono only. And I don't know that New West Records even knew we were doing a mono record. I think we just did it, you know.
Yeah.
I think.
All right, Steve, they're gonna let it happen. So hey, I just want a little technical note for those out there who have never had the joy of using an 8078 console. The monitor section on the console has no pan pots. It has a quad bus, so it has a left, right, and a left, rear, right, rear. And so to do left, to pan left, you just hit left. To go right, you just hit right. If you hit left and right, you're in glorious mono. So there's no panning other than left or right or both. That's your options. And I know a lot of people came in like get that thought like, wow, that's that option. But you know, sometimes, like you said, limitations create, you know, cool stuff.
Those are my 3 favorite
mono mixing, actually. Yeah, me too. My mono thing I did with Jack White was the reverse of that. We mixed something completely in stereo, and then had to make it mono, and that's a whole nother long story. But so I had to figure out a way to put a mono mix together really fast for a live to lathe situation, and it was a struggle. I can tell you.
So Ray, was Ghost of West Virginia digitally recorded?
Yes.
And I Feel All Right was on analog.
Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I have a response to that comment, Vance. You know, a lot of the early stereo records that came out in like 66, 67, a lot of those consoles didn't have pan pots. You know, my telephone didn't have pan pots. You have left, right, and middle. And so if a lot of those records, like the drums are on one side, even Cream records, the drums are on one side, Hendrix records, drums are on one side, guitars on the other side, usually bass is in the middle, and things, you know, the early Beatles records are like that. A lot of so many records, I go, you know, after many, many years, I mean, going back and listening to stuff, I can't believe how, like, especially on headphones, how radically wide the stereo spread is. And it's for the very reason there were no pan pots. When was the pan pot introduced into a major recording console?
Well, I know at least I know the TG console had one. So there you go. I mean,
that's probably
the red, the 5.1 didn't have one. So all the Revolver, Rubber Soul, all that, it didn't have it. Right. But somewhere around where the Beatles, like, you know, White Album, they'd started going to other studios around, and so, you know, there was other desks out there and about. So that all probably started happening then. I always remember reading that thing in the Recording the Beatles book where it talked about the drums were always on the left because they recorded drums on track 1, and track 1, you know, was just left. That's just where it went, left. And they recorded the bass on 3, and that was on the right. So, you know, they figured out, okay, cool, we got all the drum information, we got this bass information. These are going to kind of offset each other, and, you know, then let's just put the other 2 tracks we can just put in the middle for vocals. It's crazy. Well, the guitars all to one side or all the other, whatever.
I was also thinking, you know, those were pretty small format consoles. I mean, they only had like 8 channels or 12 channels. If you had enough channels, you could bring something up on 2 channels and then and make it appear at 10 o'clock or 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock, but just by adjusting the faders. But nobody had a large enough format console back then. So, so Reid, you're a big fan of wide panning on stereo mixes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like almost all the time my first instinct is to pan something hard right or hard left.
Always.
You know, and it's like I feel reluctant to put something. I've noticed, like, I've been doing some like mixed mentoring with people, and everyone's always really thinking about where to place things, and I'm just like, check this out, this, like, dime it all out, and you get a lot of room for the vocal and for the kick and the snare and the, you know, everything kind of. It's almost like what you were talking about. You're mixing mono. You're just mixing mono in 3 places instead of 1, right?
Yeah. Right.
And then if you need to pan something in for a solo or for something like that, or, you know, I know Vance is a huge fan of this. I love running a guitar over on one side and running it through a Cooper time cube to kind of make it feel like it's spread across the spectrum without it mucking up the middle, stuff like that. You know, you can pan stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of wide panning too.
Our good buddy Nico Bolas, you know, for years now, he's been mixing in the box for years, and he mixes in the box in LCR. So he literally he uses a left bus, a right bus, and a center bus, and things don't go. They're either left, they're either center, or they're right. Period. He has no panning and never uses panning ever.
Fascinating.
Crazy. Yeah, and for a long time, Pro Tools had an LCR bus, but in Pro Tools, if you assigned it, you know, you'd still get the panner. So he just made 3 buses and then made a summing at the end to sum them together. So
Wow.
But yeah, he's mixed like that for years.
It's the Trinity.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Hey, Ray, I've got a Hanford ask a question. He said, you know, Ray's acoustic guitars always sound amazing with Lou and Steve. Can you ask him a little bit about his process for recording those?
Well, I only use one mic. I don't use multiple mics on acoustics, and I just look for that sweet spot. You know, basically, I kind of do that in general with almost every instrument. I don't like multiple miking because I don't like the phase issues that can arise along the way. I know a lot of people use multiple miking and then choose the mics they want to use in the mix, but I like to commit. So it's usually like get your ear on the acoustic guitar. Where does it sound? Where does it capture everything? Get the wood of the guitar, what's coming out of the sound hole, the strings, the percussion aspect of it, and try to choose a microphone that can capture all the frequencies. And that would usually either be like a KM54, KM56, a KM64. Sometimes I'll use Mic Tech makes a mic called a C5. I like a lot because it has a little smoother throughout the mids and in the bottom, and I really like those on acoustic guitars. And I use that on Steve on Goes to West Virginia. The C5 is on the guitar, acoustic guitar, mandolin, banjo, everything.
So, and that would be C5 Neve preamp 1176.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm hitting the 1176 pretty hard. You know, I'm not recording it. By the way, I didn't clarify that. I record almost entire bands with no compression, absolutely no compression, wide open. You know, because I have enough compressors that I can do it on the inserts, and I can monitor the compression while recording, and then I commit to it in the mix. And that way, and it's not like I don't use compression in recording, but it's kind of a luxury when you have that many different compressors to use. You can kind of like, you can put it all back together again and make, if you start compressing everything and you overdo it, you can't undo it.
So do you write it down, Ray?
Oh, that's a story of my whole career. That's the story of my whole career.
Yeah.
Do you write it down? And so you can get back to it?
I take pictures.
No. Take pictures, right?
Yeah,
of course. That's fascinating. Like that never occurred to me until right now, but that is absolutely fascinating. So the band, you and the band are hearing the processed audio, but what's going to tape is not.
We're hearing it like it's like a finished record while we're recording it. It's got everything in the mix.
That's super cool.
Mix. Everything is in there. Now I have to say that that was something that developed over time as I acquired more gear. In the early days, I actually, when I only had two 1176s and maybe some DBX 160s, I actually recorded them to tape, you know, like the kick and the snare, the DBX 160 on each, and, you know, just kind of hit it enough that it did the job, but I could always do a little bit more afterwards. And 1176s, 1178s would be like 1178s on the overheads would be committed to tape. Okay. After you acquire enough gear, you can like go, well, let's just put it on the insert and let's just get a sound, and you know, you can change things while you're recording, you know, and you're not committing to tape, and you're not doing it in Pro Tools either. Now in the same regard, you can use plugins like that. You know, you can be monitoring the plugins with any kind of processing as long as it's not too much latency, and then you can like commit to it later, you know, in the mix.
That's fascinating. I love that. That's crazy.
Especially if you're using a UA and the console and using Apollos and all that, you can put them on the front side, and you can commit to them or not. Put them on the back side, either one. Of all things, Luna actually does that really well. Allow you to put a plugin on the front and then have it in playback, so you can just hear it in real time all the time.
Have you recorded an album in Luna yet?
I have not recorded an album in Luna. I have recorded a couple songs in Luna, and I mixed a couple songs. I mixed a Rival Sun song that was a real joy. It was awesome. And then I mixed another song that wasn't as well put together, and it really, I struggled with it really hard. So it was sort of one of those, like, it kind of beat me a bit. You know, one was easy for no reason other than it was low track count, and the other one was a lot of tracks. It needed a lot of cleaning up. And you know, there's I think Luna is amazing as a version 1 product. I really do. There's definitely some things that kind of make me crazy. I'm not a fan of the modal mix window. So you're either in mix or edit. You can't be in both, you know, and that kind of drives me crazy. And I don't like the fact that the tools, you can't adjust. You can't pick the tool. Luna has to pick the tool for you by your position in the track. That makes me crazy. But all these are things that they're all working on. Also, there's no way to process something on the timeline, like if I have RX or something and I want to clean something up. There's no way to do it without jumping through a lot of hoops in Luna to do it. There's no audio suite.
There's no version.
There's no audio suite or anything like that. Yeah. All stuff that's coming, they're just not here in version 1. I mean, it's very stable. I mean, it's been really stable every time I've ever used it.
It's funny that you say that. I never realized this until I got to talking to some people, but I never, ever used the mix window in Pro Tools, ever. Like, not once. I don't know why. You do a lot?
No, not really. What I do is I park mine up in the session, you know, at the top here, as small as I can get it. So I get rid of all the auxes. I have plugins, and I have IO. I have the meter, you know, the fader, right? And then I just pop back and forth. I want to add a plugin or whatever. I just do it right there. But I'm not a big fan of having all that stuff on the side of my edit window. I don't want anything over there, but maybe IO or something like that. So, so that's the only reason I would use the mix window. And from time to time, you know, I'll have a piece of something inside a mix that might need automated. I would just do it there.
Right.
You know, I have a little stupid fader port. I just scroll the stupid thing to it and touch and write it and then done. But yeah, so that's the only reason I ever really use it. But if you're mixing in the box, which is what Luna is, you need the mix window. Yeah. And what I like is I look at the mix window, and I'm looking at the mix window while doing things. Of course, again, in Luna, there's no control surface. So you're touching a fader. I want to see, okay, cool. Here comes that chorus part. All right, I'm going to anticipate that. I'm going to lower this. I'm going to, you know, and you can't do it because you can't be in both at once.
Gotcha. So, Ray, you're always mixing analog, right? Are you always on your console, or are you mixing anything in the box?
I mainly use the console, but I use basically the digital is for just cleaning stuff up and doing mutes and, you know, a little bit of automation, but not that much. You know, basically I like to have my hands on the faders. As a matter of fact, I've kind of come full circle. Like I did get pretty deep into using automation, you know, volume automation, panning automation, whatever. Just use all the things you can do, and, you know, fades and everything, to like just clean top and tail in the track and muting things I don't want to hear, and then bring everything up on the console. So now I'm kind of mixing like I did back in the 90s. I'm actually writing the vocal on a fader. I'm writing the lead instruments on a fader, because then the mix becomes a performance like it was in the old days of tape. So I've kind of gone back to the way I worked on tape. And so the thing is once you start automating a vocal and a lead guitar and this and that, it's like, you know, it's sort of like you listen to it and you get it perfect, but you know what? There's something about a performance mix where you actually got your hands on the faders that you can't get there in the digital world. And I really enjoy mixing that way because it kind of brings the fun back into it. And probably in the last year and a half or so, I've been mixing that way.
You write a little script?
No, I just
have to do that.
I just go for it. I just go for it. Print mix. If it's not it, I do another one, and just like back in the days when we were.
And you just printing back into the Pro Tools session.
Back into Pro Tools usually. Sometimes I print into a mastering program, and occasionally I go to my ATR, but that hasn't happened in a while.
Yeah.
But printing back in the Pro Tools, you have the luxury of being able to punch into your mix and all that. But
yeah,
I don't really think about the desire to do that. I'd rather do it from top to bottom and get a whole performance. I will say that the reason it's really attractive, there are quite a few songs on albums that were rough mixes of tape back in the 90s. This is the other case for having all your processing not committed to tape, where I have like record full dynamics, right, to tape or digital, and have everything as an insert or a plug-in. And so as I'm mixing, it's I'm adjusting things, but I can change things because nothing's committed to tape or digital. And so in that regard, I've had some rough mixes, a lot of rough mixes that ended up being on albums that were, 5-10 minute mixes, and I come back and spend 10 hours trying to beat it, and I just can't even get close to it,
Okay, let me interject here, because someone just asked this question, right? Christian just said, what's your approach to mixing? Your mixes always sound rough in a good way and interesting. How do you keep yourself from going too far in perfecting all the elements? I think you were just explaining it.
I think I just get, hands-on faders is it. I will say that, you mentioned Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. There's one song on there that was like an early mix. It's called Metal Firecracker. It's one of the first couple songs that we recorded, and cut the track. We did, Gurf put a background vocal on it. I think we stuck a tambourine on it. I did a rough mix. And back in the day, those days, we called them board mixes. So what was up on the board, and I just printed the mix. And then later on, when we went to mastering, Mike Scott ended up mixing that record. I didn't mix it. When we went to mastering, I went and dug the original board mix out and played it went out in the car and played it for Lucinda, and said, hey, I think we need to use this version. And she agreed with me, and we did, it's like, because it got changed, something happened to it.
Yeah.
There was some magic there. We went back and grabbed it, So,
well, Ray, you produce, you produce, write, play, engineer, mix, master. Do you find it easier to be doing all of those things, or do you find it difficult, say, to like master something that you've mixed?
Sometimes it's a budget restriction. Sometimes I'm doing a low budget indie record, and we can't afford to hire a mastering engineer. Sometimes we cut the track, the whole record in 2 days, do some overdubs, some background vocals, and mix it and master it. But I'd say that the ability to master your own mixes, it is a bit challenging. But what I do now, and what I have done for a long time, is I try to make my mixes sound like finished records, and that's by going through some Neve 2264s and 33609 metal knob, first generation. Also, there's a there's a 1178 in there too. That's not really, none of these compressors are hardly doing anything. You don't even see the needles move. They're just basically running through the transformers. So that mix pretty much sounds like a record. All it needs to be gained up, you know.
Gotcha.
I mean, I don't really do, when I'm mastering my own stuff, I don't really hardly do anything to it, you know. Tiny little bits of EQ and just gain it up to, you know, proper levels. But, you know, I will say that my mix bus is a pretty unusual chain. I'm going through 1178, but it's a really, really early version of it. You guys know about the silver face 1178s, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you see mainly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like those at all. As a matter of fact, they don't sound good, you know. And you can't hit them very hard. They kind of crap out. But I've got like a really early 1178 that's kind of got a light gold color to it. Have you ever seen one?
Oh, wow.
No.
Like a really early one, okay? It's like light gold, okay? And it's got different transformers, different circuit. And so I go through that stage one. I'm going through the input and output transformers, and I'm not really doing any compression. I'm just going through it just because I like the sound of it. And then I'm hitting a pair of 2264s and barely touching those. And then I'm going through the metal knob 33609. So I'm going through a lot of transformers, basically.
64s are the Neves without the limiters, right? It's got the compressor, but not the limiter. Those upright ones?
Upright, yeah.
The console, they went in the correction modules in a 78.
Right, yeah. But anyways, you know, there is some compression going on. However, you don't really like on the 33609. I don't even see the needles move. You know, I'm hitting it 2-to-1. I'm just going through those old transformers. You know, and so it just kind of glues everything together in a really nice way. But it doesn't sound compressed. You know,
Right.
Me it doesn't, anyways.
So you're essentially running your mix through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sets of transformers. In, out, in, out, in, out.
Yeah.
Interesting. Have you ever, just out of curiosity, have you ever tried just running through a transformer wired, you know, or an input and output wired together?
I never have. No.
Well, maybe we should try that.
Reid's got a whole bunch of them. He'll happily check.
Yeah. I got some Neve transformers. We'll play with it. Hey, have you tried the True Iron plugin, which is transformer modeling? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I did try it. Yeah. You know, I'm not really big on plugins. You know,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting into the UA world, and because I think they're the best plugins I've ever used, and I just don't own them. And I think they're like, if you're going to use plugins, that's the way to go.
Weren't you just saying that the new UA interfaces, you really love the way those sounded too?
Yeah, I think they're great. Yeah.
Was it the X's?
The third generation.
Yeah.
Now I've been in a lot of other studios.
I've got an 8P, the X right here, actually here at the house. So yeah, I understand.
You know, I work on it at other studios. I've used Generation 1, the silvers, and then with the black faces, and now this X series is really, to me, the best sounding, you know. That's why I want to put together like at least a 16-channel rig for mobile recording. And I'll probably start using it at my studio, you know, adding that onto my other system.
Very cool. Well, hopefully someone at UA is watching us right now.
Yeah.
Erica. Hey, so back real quick. I mean, we're all big fans of the U67. But like you said, the Mic Tech, you know, is a really good, modern, inexpensive option to a KM54. Do you have a modern take on like a U67 that you dig? I know Vance likes the Peluso a lot, right?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually pretty impressed by it.
Yeah, I just haven't listened to that many of them. I know that I've heard that the Pelusos, you got to get the one. Like if you had 6 to try out, you might pick there's one that might stand out. That's what Chuck Ainley told me.
Well, that's how every U67 is pretty much.
Yeah, pretty
right?
much every old microphone, right?
I mean, to me, the one is always the one that I own.
Mhm.
Even if it's not the best one, it is the one I own. So, but I've used the 67s along with like real 67s, the Peluso on electric guitar cabs, and it stood up as well as any of the other ones. And I've heard the new Neumanns, and those are pretty awesome. And they're kind of popping around now. Yeah. Well, they're popping around now for $5,000.
Really? Okay.
Man, those are great.
So, yeah, they're really good.
Yeah,
I mean, the thing was that the tube is nothing special. It never has been anything special. It was just all about the capsule and the transformer, and they can build a good capsule, and as long as the transformer and the caps are close, and it's pretty close, pretty damn good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm impressed with it. So,
is it true?
But
Ray,
Go
ahead, Vance. Keep going.
No, I was just gonna say, depending on how things are, Peluso, you can get a pair of them for $5,000 or so, or buy one of the new Neumanns for $5,000. Which one is better? Well, I mean, if you need 2 of them, that's a better deal. So I don't know. I don't know which one's going to be worth the same amount in 10 years. They're going to be worth the same. Doesn't matter. Maybe it's not vintage, so it doesn't matter.
Just before we shut down,
Go ahead.
the first week of March, I had just started on a new Nitty Gritty Dirt Band record, and it's their first record in 12 years. And the whole band came in, and we were having a good time. It was going really well, and we were like 4 or 5 days into it. I think we cut like 9 tracks, and they went out on a weekend tour to the East Coast. They had 4 dates, and about halfway through the tour is when things started shutting down. And by the time they got back to town, we decided to shut down. I mean, that was when we got the early warnings, and everybody, they just went home. 4 of them live here. One lives in, Jimmy lives in Florida. Bob lives in LA. So we're going to pick that back up again in the fall, probably. I'm not sure. But the reason I mentioned that is Jeff Hanna brought over his U67 that he's had for a really long time, and he sang through it. And I set it up, and I still sang a little bit. I still write songs, and I had my ears on that mic, and I have to say I think it's the best sounding 67 I've ever heard. It's so clean, and it's all original, and it's just a beauty, and it's still here, as a matter of fact.
Oh yeah, he told me, by the way, that I need to come by and pick that up. So I'll see you later today.
We had.
Hey, is it true? Is it true? Steve Earle joked that you should just call one of the records 1176.
Yeah, he did say that. Yeah.
Hey, Russ wants to know, how did you go from being a traffic cop to songwriter, engineer, producer?
Well, the traffic cop thing was just sort of like after I got out of university at Portland State in Oregon. It was just sort of like I needed to work, and a friend of mine was a motorcycle escort that took over the shop. He said, "Well, we've got an opening here, and so all you got to do is you got to take a test, and then you have to go out with our #1 rider and try to keep up with them downtown Portland, Oregon, through the alleys and stuff." And I managed to keep up with them, and so I got the gig. I had it for 2 years.
Yeah.
So basically, they send you to get fitted for leathers, the Portland police uniform, the badge, the whistle, the cap, the leathers, and oh man, it was fun. It was fun to be on a bike all day, And it was traffic control, celebrities that needed escort to the Coliseum, and funerals, and just a lot of funerals. Yeah. So
back to something newer. Sean Trainer said, "Can you talk a little bit about making the Chris Knight record?"
The most recent one?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've made a few records with Chris, and they're always live. I mean, it's like Chris, I get Chris on, he usually plays one of my Gibsons, usually a J45 or an SJ. And basically, the last record we did with his road band, and this record I put together the band. I had Lynn Williams on drums and Lex Price on bass. And his guitar player, Chris, tours with him. And oh man, we cut the whole record in 4 days, you know, and great songs. We didn't, you know, it's like live vocals. Chris, when Chris nails it, usually the band's there too. You know, it's like, I don't know why it always works out like that. Usually when the artist like does their best performance, the band is right there with them. You know, I think that they get inspired by their performance. You know, I really think
in a perfect world, that's how it has to. That's the best.
Yeah, and so also, you know, I was very, very deep into, you know, just mixing straight off the faders, you know. So Chris called me. He said, "Hey, can I come down when you're mixing?" I go, "Yeah. What day you want to do it?" And he goes, "Well, how about next Thursday?" You know. So he came down. We mixed the whole record in one day. You know, and we actually did some guitar overdubs too, and mixed the whole record. Yeah, we did. It was
awesome.
It was crazy. It was like, you know, but there's not a lot to do, really. I mean, it was sort of the way it was recorded. You just throw the faders up and there it is, you know, ride the vocal, ride the lead instruments and print it, you know. So that's about as live of a record as I've done in a long time, you know, just like, you know, pretty much in the moment, you know.
How did you come up in recording, Ray? Did you do the mentorship thing where you were assisting and like working your way up through that whole thing? What do you think about that?
Not at all. Basically, I came to Nashville to be a songwriter. I had no expectations to do anything else except try to get a writing deal. But I had a lot of experience playing in bands all from high school through college and touring in the Midwest and on the West Coast, you know. And when I was going to Portland State, I was playing 5 or 6 nights a week in a bar. So I always had the sound system. I always had carried the sound system around, and I was always the engineer, and I always mixed from the stage. So I did the front of house mix and the monitor mix. So that's where my engineer skills came from, doing live sound and doing it myself, you know. And you know, packing up my Nash Rambler with, you know, EV speakers and stands and power amps and whatever, you know. But when I came to Nashville, what I you know, I kind of got lucky, and I got some good cuts when I got here. I got a John Anderson cut and a Dave Allen Co cut and a Charlie Pride cut, and it led to me signing with Tree. And once I got signed to Tree, they had a really nice studio there. So I started hanging out in the studio, started doing demos there, and I put a studio together in my house. And so, but I was also, for some reason, people liked my voice. So I got hired by a lot of publishing companies to sing other people's songs. So I started hanging out in lots of studios, and I started getting a really big curiosity about recording and different consoles, and what does this do and what does that do? And I go, do you mind if I get in here and mess around with this? And no, you can't do that. You know, it's like, and I persisted, and eventually, you know, I got to sit in front of a console and, you know, start, you know, mixing my own demos. And that's really where I got infected with the idea of, like, you know, doing that, being an engineer, you know. And then, you know, then I went through the whole phase of having drum machines and having a MIDI studio with a Linn drum machine and a MPC 60 and a Linn 9000 and daisy chaining.
All 1986.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I had a bunch of keyboards, and you know, was a good enough keyboard player. It's all about coming up with parts and then doing guitars and vocals and slaving it to a Fostech 16-track tape recorder and a MIDI studio that was unlimited pretty much. And then I started making records with some other people. That was like in 85, 86, you know. John Jarvis was a good friend, and we did his master, it's a master series record for MCI. We did, it was a MIDI record, basically. John came in and played, we just did, you know, we had like 32 tracks of MIDI and a tape machine. So, but eventually, I think what really led me to where I am now is getting signed to Atlantic Records and having them give me a bunch of money. And I went out and bought a brand new 2-inch tape recorder and a lot of microphones and preamps and stuff. You know, when a record label gives you an advance of $180,000, that's some pretty nice play money from 1990. And
I was going to say in 1990, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a good deal.
Yeah.
So,
well, was that your MCI?
No, that was an Atari.
It was Atari.
Brand new Atari.
I mean, still, those were what, 30 grand, something like that, 35.
38,000.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting fun fact. I was digging through the internet the other day looking for stuff about Compass Point, the Blackwell studio down in the Bahamas where they did Back in Black.
Yeah.
And that was done on a MCI console, I believe, with an MCI
Royal now.
Tape machine. Huh?
It's a Royal now. That console's
Royal?
Yeah.
And the guitars were all U67s on the cabinets.
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Which
I thought was kind of fascinating.
At Royal has the Compass Point MCI. I don't know about the tape machine, but they have the console.
Well, you know, it's funny, like we get back to that, Ray, because the Maxon console, there's not a whole lot of people running around like extolling the virtues of vintage Maxon consoles, but the more you talk about it, the more I kind of want to use it. Like it sounds amazing. Did you use that desk on car wheels also?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's been my main desk since 1990. Actually, it was built in 1989, and it has.
Not good.
It has Megamix on it. So
does it work?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a really good automation. Dave Kalmusky uses Megamix.
Yep. He's the only other guy I know that has a working version of it.
We've had a lot of conversations. Yeah. He went through a lot of torture to get it to work because it has to work on a really early Macintosh, like a Classic 2 or an
LC2 or something like that.
Yep.
But he's got it smoked.
Was that done at your current studio or was that the old studio?
That was down on Music Row in the Fiside building. That was originally digital recorders. It was Bullet. And then when Norbert had it, it was digital recorders. There were 2 tracking rooms. Right. One side was Midtown, the other side was Room and Board.
Room and Board, super cool studio. I remember walking in there and seeing all these guitars and just being like, "Holy shit! Like, whose place was this?" Which is kind of like your place now.
Yeah, it's the same guitars. There's more guitars, actually. You know, guitars.
Hey, does your laptop, can it move? Do you want to show people your space a little bit? Yep. That's a lot of guitars.
Let's see. I'm in the kitchen.
Oh boy.
Yeah, amazing.
Yep.
The control room's up top, right?
Yeah.
Control room's upstairs. How much water did you get in when the flood happened?
A couple feet. You know, I mean, I had 40 hard drives underwater. You know, I had 40 hard drives underwater. So, you know, my insurance company said, well, we'll just send them all off to a data recovery place. I said, well, I don't think so. You know, I checked on the reliability of what kind of results you might get by sending 40 hard drives off. I just said, look, let me do the research. And I built a dehydration room and got the humidity down below 20%. And I took all my gear that was underwater. I opened up the hard drives and put them in there for 2 weeks, plus any other of my gear that was underwater. Guitar amps, some 1176s, just, I just dehydrated the crap out of everything. And I recovered 39 out of the 40 hard drives.
That's pretty amazing.
Took a lot of time and took a lot of research, but the thing is with vintage gear, if you dry it out for a really long time, it's going to be fine. Even like a Fender Tweed amp with paper cone speaker and the transformer, the paper wound transformer.
Yeah.
If you dry it out for 4, 5, 6 months, it's going to be fine. The thing is, the water I got was not dirt. It wasn't river water. It was mainly what came back up.
Rainwater.
Drains. It was rainwater. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But yeah. So the thing is, I didn't really the stuff that I had to toss was like newer electronics. Like reverbs and anything with a green motherboard.
Yeah.
Didn't survive. I didn't think I had 6 Yamaha 2200 power amps, and I didn't think they would make it, because by the time they sat out in the container for a couple months, they were kind of rusty looking. But I brought one in one day and hooked it up, and it was fine. I checked them all out; they're completely fine. They're still working. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Back in my days as a tech, I worked at a tech and a music store, and we would get gear in. A lot of times we'd get PV amps that were blown up, and I'd go to open them up, and the inside would be full of like nicotine and hair and all kinds of shit, like this green goo. Yeah. And I would just take it, put it in our van, take it to the car wash, put on the rinse free or the mineral free rinse, wash the thing out, like fully wash the whole thing out, and then just set it up and let it dry for a couple days, blow dry it, air it out, whatever needed to be fixed it, and they'd power on, and they're probably still working somewhere. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, somebody told me that in the manufacturing process of most electronics, the last stage is to wash everything down, let it dry out.
Yeah.
Clean everything up, clean up the circuit boards and everything. And once it's dry, you put it back together and it's fine.
Yeah. So we're saying that this is true. I've actually seen people doing this. You could literally take a garden hose to a lot of this stuff, and as long as it dries completely, no big deal.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't want to plug it in too soon. I mean, you got to give it a lot. Like 4 to 6 months to dry out. Especially
right
and so forth. I want to go back and mention something else that I've been doing now for quite a few years. Is my front end for my whole recording rig is pretty much all tubes. So it's all Telefunken, the Telefunken console, which is an 8-channel console with four buses with their V76Ss. And then there's V72As for the summing buses, and I use those sometimes, but usually I'm straight in and straight out. So it's the V76S, the old German fader, and an EQ called a W95C, which is indented into quarter dBs. So I don't use a lot of EQ, but I use a little bit. And it's really sweet EQ. They're popular for mastering, using mastering.
Right.
So it's a 60 hertz bottom, 10K, and then a mid-range, sweepable mid-range. But so I've got that, and I've got a whole other rack of Telefunken V76Ms, which you guys know about those.
Oh yeah.
And then a bunch of V72s, and then I've got a whole rack of Altecs that are all discrete channels. There was one of those green Altec mixers that was, I spent a bunch of money on it, changing it into discrete individual preamps with separate outputs and all that. So I've got like about 20 channels of all tube front end. And so that tube front end, there's something about it that, like, recording especially into digital, I usually record at 96K just because that's what the labels want. All the labels want 96K.
Yep.
And so I don't really care if it's 96K, 48, or 41, but 96 is what has become the standard for archiving. So I just do everything at 96K. But that tube front end is amazing sounding. It allows me to record pretty much everything flat. Like I said, with no dynamics, no dynamic control, no compression, straight in. I'm getting compression from the tubes, which is a really nice thing. You hit a V72 or V76 pretty good, especially like with drums, you're getting tube compression. And it's a saturation. It's a sound, so
yeah.
I really like my front end, and that's sort of, I've been doing that for quite a long time now. And then on playback everything through my CAD console, and everything sounds really good just as recorded. So when I mix, I don't really have to do that much to it,
There's a guy here in town that has a bunch of SSL gear. I'm sure Reid knows him, but his name is beyond me at the moment. And he actually had some CAD Maxon modules in his. Yeah, he had some modules, and I always remember seeing those, and I always, I wonder what those are like. But he just had them on a wall, like stuck up there, like spares or something.
Was he using it for the EQ? For the EQ, that's really the best part of the console.
I just remember that's what it being, but I don't remember what part it was because I didn't know much about it then. But I wish I did. Now I wish I did.
Quick question about Telefunken. Yeah, me too. I just, the V76s, the V72 is like half the gain stage, right?
Yes.
But do you feel like they sound pretty radically different from the 76s?
They do sound different. There's a difference between all the V76s as well. There's a difference between the S's and the M's. The M's have no filters on them, and they're pure gain. Well, even when you are not really using the filters on the 76Ss, I know the Beetle Red consoles were V72Ss, and it's been debated what the S means. Does it mean studio, or does it mean silent, or what?
Super.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Sweet. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, they're the same tubes. But the architecture of V76, I would say the V76M is the best sounding preamp I know of. Period. There's nothing compared to it. Yeah.
I would agree. No, but so for people out there who don't get to own these, A, have you run, what would you use if you couldn't use those? And B, have you messed around again with the Universal Audio's V76 at all? Because they have an V76 plug. It's pretty cool.
I'm looking forward to that. I haven't. I've been in studios where I've used a lot of the UA software, and it's really good. I really like it, but I haven't when you don't own something, you don't get to dive as deep into it. Because when you're in a recording session or a mix session, you're on the fly. It's
cranking.
But once I get my hands on the UA plugins, I'm going to be digging deep into them. And the mic emulations too, I hear, are pretty good too.
Everything they make is pretty kick-ass.
Yeah.
So Mark is throwing flags at me saying that we should probably get this wrapped up. So, man, Ray, I just wanted to say thank you. It's always great talking to you. And
absolutely, man.
So many amazing records. I would encourage everybody out there to go digging through Ray's discography because, he's doing amazing work. He's done consistently amazing work. And as you just heard, a lot of it is very, very basic. So if you think you have to go out and get all this stuff and do all this craziness to get a great record, you don't. Check out this man's discography and listen to what he does. Also check out his website. It's easy to find. He does mastering and mixing and all that good stuff. And Ray, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ray.
Thank you,
Great
guys.
to see you, man.
Yeah.
Hope to see you around town here shortly. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe not shortly, but
I
at some
drive
point.
by your place all the time, and Reid's right around the corner from where I live. So yeah,
All right.
maybe we'll be able to get together pretty soon.
And I know Siobhan's looking at this. I know she's watching. So, Siobhan, all I love.
Yes, absolutely. Love you, girl.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, Ray, great to meet you, and thank you for doing this. Thanks for spending your time with us. It's awesome.
Thanks, Puremixers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate everything. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's get to work now. Come on.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
Oh, hold it.
Yeah.
Check this out.
Oh,
Serious work to do. Nice.
dang. I'll be right over.
Come on over.
All right.
All right. See you again.
Awesome. Guys, tomorrow we got Fab DuPont and Stelliets are going to finish the song they were working on last week. On Thursday,
cool.
we're doing a Q&A with Adam Hawkins. That'll be fun. Adam makes the latest 21 Pilots stuff and Muse and a bunch of other ones.
Wow.
And on Friday, we have a massive thing planned. Fab is going to be cooking ratatouille on camera and bringing up some friends who will be doing a cook along with him from different locations. So a little different take on mix day. It'll be pretty fun.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right, everybody.
All right.
See you, Ray.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.
We'll see you later.
Bye.